So I'm Nicholas Ruston. I'm the founder of Robot Mascot. And at Robot Mascot, we specialize in creating investment materials that convince investors. And we work exclusively with founders seeking pre-seed, seed, and Series A funding. So, like, we've supported over 3,000 founders to date, and our clients are 40 times more likely to raise investment. And collectively, they've raised more than 220 million. So before I invite our special guest today to take the stage, I just want to point you all in the direction of our free 90-minute fundraising strategy session. So if you're currently raising investment, if you're planning on raising, or you're just trying to figure out whether or not raising investment is for you, that session is going to unpack the winning strategy that leads to huge success for our clients. And we've got some free spaces available. They're limited, so do get in quick, and I'll be sharing that link to book your place in the chat shortly. So before I introduce Misha and Yo, I just want to say that at Robot Mascot, we're really fortunate because we get to work with so many inspiring founders that are taking leaps into the unknown. But taking those leaps, it can be pretty daunting, and sometimes it can be pretty lonely too. And it can be really difficult to know where to turn to get the right advice. And that's why we like to bring you these sessions, to support you in your journey and to give you access to great people like Misha and Yayo that can help you along the way. Now, so let me tell you a little bit about the hosts. Who's going to present today. Misha Patel is a tax professional. She works closely with founder-led businesses, advising on areas such as R&D tax credits, enterprise management incentives, seed enterprise investment schemes, and personal tax. Trinh is a corporate and commercial solicitor, and she works with SMEs, advising on a wide range of matters, including company formation, equity investments, corporate restructuring, shareholders agreements, joint ventures, and asset and share sales. So I know you're going to get a lot out of today's session. So please feel free to be vocal and ask lots of questions today, lots of questions at the end. And now I'd like to introduce you to Misha and Yayo from Dragon Argent.
Hi there all. Thank you, Nick, for the introduction. So I'm Yao. Like Nick said, I'm the head of corporate and commercial here at Dragon Argent. Next to me is my colleague Misha, who's our tax consultant and, as Nick said, knowledgeable tax. So brief introduction about ourselves. We're from Dragon Argent. We are an established and growing and ambitious boutique firm with a mixture of professional services covering from advisors. Dragon Argent, we are an established and growing boutique firm of professional services where we cover legal, tax, accounting, and advisory. The firm has been going for over 20 years now, led by our founder and head of advisory, James, who's a seasoned founder himself. James set the company up because he identified a number of frustrations as he was a founder, where he was talking to multiple different companies in different places and constantly repeating himself, and therefore felt he wanted to set up a firm where he could bring all of that in one place, so founders themselves can just go to one place without having to go to different people at different times. So Dragon Argent, we predominantly work with founders and startups and scale-ups. Obviously, like I say, led by founders. The four areas that we work from, we've identified these are the four key areas and core areas that founders need from the very beginning, and we're here to help and help you with your business growth so you can get on with the business side of things, and we effectively become your back office. So that is how we see ourselves. So from there, I think we're probably going to kick off. So as we say, the sessions on SEIS and EIS investments. So I'll probably kick off and ask Misha the first question as to why she thinks SEIS and EIS schemes are important for early stage businesses.
So genuinely, early stage businesses find it really hard to raise investment. So what SEIS and EIS do is essentially it helps and it basically gives investors a tax break. So income tax relief and capital gains tax relief. And this basically just encourages individuals to invest more in smaller businesses.
Yeah, so it's good to say we say the income tax and capital gains tax. So what sort of tax breaks are we looking at for these investors?
So for individuals that are investing into an SEIS and EIS company, an individual under SEIS gets a 50% income tax relief, and that's up to £200,000. And under EIS, they get a 30% income tax relief, and that's up to £1 million. And then secondly, if provided that the shares are held for 3 years within that company, there is no capital gains tax. So as you can see, it's a very generous scheme, and it really does help investors really invest into these small businesses to help them grow and develop. And then secondly and thirdly, in terms of investment into a company, the maximum loss relief, so let's say a company goes into liquidation under SEIS, where individuals are looking at a loss around 27% of their investment. Under EIS, it's about 38% of their investment.
So yeah, sounds like there's a good incentive, there's a very enticing incentive for investors to invest in these startup companies. So at what stage should a startup business start thinking about SEIS and EIS eligibility from a tax perspective?
Yeah, so generally I would advise that companies come to us either before they've incorporated, because we can help founders, directors sometimes claim SEIS and EIS themselves. Obviously, it has to be structured in the right way. But generally, I would also say if you've incorporated your company, started trading, then at any point where you need that investment to help boost your company, help it grow and develop, then come to us. Then we can help you put in the right structure, advise you accordingly. If you can claim SEIS or EIS, sometimes you can claim both. So yeah, definitely reach out at any point you need the investment, or even before, or even if you're thinking maybe a year down the line you want to start a new business. We can advise you if it qualifies, if it meets all the criteria under the legislation, and also help you just to structure it so tax efficiently that you yourselves can qualify from the investment.
Right. So with all things internet, there's an awful lot of information about SEIS and EIS, and there are certain companies and business saying getting what we call advanced assurance to be fairly straightforward and very simple. So when you speak to clients, what are the common mistakes you see these companies or startups have made in relation to their setup, or in terms of supposedly applying for advanced assurance?
So generally, if we just take a step back and if I explain what advanced assurance is, it's basically like a provisional indication that your company qualifies under the scheme. And that gives investors comfort that their investment, they're not going to lose their investment, they're going to receive their income tax relief. Now, generally, the mistakes I see is companies not having the right documentation, not applying early enough for the advanced assurance. So we're looking typically about 4 to 6 weeks before you get the approval from HMRC that you qualify as a company for the scheme. Most companies only look at the advanced assurance when they're ready to seek investment. You need to have that documentation ready, so you can go out to your investors and say, look, I'm unqualified. I'm a qualified company from HMRC, please invest into my business. Secondly, is all the correct documentation. So you need to have a cash flow forecast. You need to have a business plan or investment deck explaining exactly what your trading activity is. And then lastly, which is a bit of a chicken and egg situation, you need at least 3 investors' details, so name, addresses, amounts that are going to invest into your company. And this is just to show HMRC that you're a legitimate company. You're not out there to just make a quick buck. So there's a lot of things that you need to think about. But firstly, I would say definitely look into advanced assurance, because if you're looking to raise investment, investors will be looking for that, because especially now, especially the way the economy is, they're going to want to make sure that their investment is safe.
totally concur with that. I can give a real life example where I helped in a client for this is for their EIS investment. They went out speaking to everybody, having had a previous advance assurance, tried to speak to investors on that basis. And then the investor said, that's good to know, but I want to know that my specific money will qualify for EIS. So they then had to put a subsequent advance assurance application in, and lo and behold, HMRC raised further questions, and therefore it delayed their whole investment round by about 2 months. So it's not that they didn't get it, but it just delayed everything. So if you have a specific timeline around when you need the money in, it's definitely to have to factor that in first. So therefore, we do recommend getting advance assurance, if you can in the first place. And that was a bit of an anomaly because generally, if you get advance assurance the first time, you generally will get it the second time. But if there is maybe a gap between the two periods, then it may HMRC may raise questions, and therefore it just delays the whole process a little bit longer. So it's just something to factor in mind. So on the basis of that, then, so what should founders be doing to structure their cap table to ensure that they remain SEIS and EIS compliant?
So a couple of things would be number one, just ensure that no investor or their associate has more than 30%, holds more than 30% of the business. Shares have to be ordinary shares. There can't be any redemption rights on them shares, with no redemption rights. We also have to make sure that there's no loans or debt instruments that convert into SEIS and EIS. And then lastly, when you raise, let's say if a company is doing a dual raise under SEIS and EIS, you have to be very careful about the way it's structured. So HMRC loves to see SEIS shares being issued before their shares. So you can't issue both shares on the same day. There has to be at least a gap. But it has to be structured in a way where it meets the full legislation, the way the investment comes in, the way the shares are issued. So that's something myself and Yao can definitely help you with. It's important to get it correct, otherwise your investors might receive their SEIS in contact with you. So next I'm going to ask Yao some legal questions around the scheme. So yeah, what legal structures or documents must the startup have in place before applying for SEIS and EIS?
Right, so the key structure for to qualify for SEIS and EIS would be to have the business within a company. So this is you actually have to form a company. You can't have the business, you can't be trading from your own name, it can't be from a partnership. Reason being is because the idea is that you have to issue equity shares for the investment, and you can't do that if you're a sole trader, and you can't do that from a partnership. So the key thing is that it has to be within a company. In terms of documentation, Misha's already mentioned a few of them. So from a commercial, practical perspective, you would suggest a business plan with financial forecasts. If you've been formed for a year or two, we need latest sets of accounts. It needs to provide some basic explanation about the risk of investors investing in your company, details of all your trading activities. We would need a legal documentation called the Articles of Association. So this is the document which sets out what the company can and can't do. You typically find it as part of your company when you form the company. Any fundraising proposals that you may have issued to your investors, details of any other agreements that you may have in place that will be in place between you, the company, and your investors, and any other documents really that support that you meet the conditions required under the two schemes. So it's a long list. But generally, if you're at the start, the list is typically you don't necessarily will have to provide all of those, because as a startup you won't have that. But as you continue to grow and if you're to continue to raise funds through time, then that list of documents may become longer, and that's what you need to provide to HMRC.
Great. So how do shareholder agreements and investor protection rights affect a company's SEIS and EIS status?
So the key thing around shareholders agreement and articles, as I said, is they govern how a company operates and the rights of each shareholders and investors within the company. So the idea is we need to show that we can't be giving any form of preferences to any of the investors. If we show any of those, then that will invalidate any potential for SEIS and EIS. The idea is they need to show that these shares and this investment will carry a risk of them potentially losing their money. So if the idea, for example, if you suggest that these investors are going to get a fixed return every year, that would be seen as a preference, and HMRC does not like that, and it would fall foul of the SEIS and EIS schemes. So that's one reason. However, that's not to say that investors can't have a say in sort of key decisions about the company. As shareholders, they will generally have limited say about the day-to-day operations of a company, unlike yourselves as founders, where you are the one running the company every day. So what articles of association and shareholders agreements can do is put in provisions whereby on certain decisions, the company can't make those decisions without their consent. So things like that. They would also ensure things like they can't be left in the lurch. So if you decide to sell your shares in the company, there may be provisions whereby they require the buyer to buy their shares out as well, so everyone gets bought out at the same time, so you can't leave them behind. Similarly, if you're selling only a certain amount, it may be that they have the option to be part of that sale, saying, well, if you're selling, we want to sell as well, and therefore a buyer will need to require to buy part of their shares as well. So everyone's been trying to be treated as fairly as possible on an equal basis as much as possible. So it's in those documents as well. It provides clarities and roles and responsibilities about, again, defining what your position as founder, what you can and can't do as a director, and any specific rights that you have as a shareholder as well. You have to remember, once you have to set up a company, the company is seen in the eyes of the law as separate from yourself. So that's one of the key things we find with a lot of founders who sometimes struggle with that concept, where the company is one person and you yourself is separate. So that's how you need to think about it when you're running your company. And the idea is also on the basis that while everyone is on a sort of mutual understanding and on good terms, the agreements will also sometimes set out how we can deal with disputes if they were to occur from time to time. And the idea is that it deals with it from the outset, rather than having to try and deal with at the back end when the relation's falling apart and everyone ends up with huge legal costs and bills to try and settle a dispute. So these are some of the reasons why we have bespoke articles and shareholders agreements in place to protect everyone involved in the company.
So my next question was around any red flags that investors or founders might have during the due diligence process. I think you've already mentioned a few, but are there any others?
So the idea I would say is, whilst one thing is everyone starts up a business, but generally when SEIS and EIS are, it's generally applicable to most companies, it's not applicable to all companies. So one of the key ones I would say that doesn't apply is property investment companies. That type of company would not qualify for any SEIS or EIS relief if an investor was to invest in those companies. There is also sometimes a lot of confusion around, both schemes. So people think they go out to investors saying, for example, I'll put put $500,000 in my company and you qualify for SEIS. That's clearly not correct, because SEIS you can raise up to £250,000. So therefore, that's not quite correct. So it's understanding the two different schemes and how they work. Something that we would be able to advise you should you when you get to that stage, and if you want to raise investments. So that would be something we will do. Necessary red flags as well is the idea is, like I said, before going out to raise funds, always make sure you speak to someone, make sure you qualify for the schemes itself. As I said, in terms of the size, how long you've been trading, whether you're trading, the type of business, the money, the amount you're looking to raise, and just getting all that in order. Really, sometimes we find that people, a lot of founders, unfortunately, have these grand ideas, but have set up incorrectly, and as a result, has in a way ruined their potential chances of qualifying for SEIS or EIS, and therefore what they tend to do is have to reset up again, and then just incur additional costs that wasn't required had they spoken to someone from the outset. So the main thing is, if you are interested in the sort of red flags, is basically speak to someone before jumping in. Really, is what I would say.
So some questions that general clients ask us is, what does a typical SEIS and EIS ready company look like from both a tax and legal perspective? From a tax perspective, is just to always have the advance assurance ready. It's actually not a prerequisite that you apply for advance assurance. So HMRC don't expect you to apply for advance assurance, but just the way investors are, and because it's so risky to invest into small businesses, most investors nowadays do request it. So what you could potentially start off by doing is asking around if people want to invest in your business. Some people might be like, yes, we'll invest, and they might not want to see the advance assurance. However, you might get that odd investor that says, I want to see the advance assurance to make sure that I receive my income tax relief. So that's just from a tax perspective.
From a legal perspective, I think it's then coming down to how much of the company you are willing to give up in the company for the investment. As I said, the key thing is to come below 30% for each investor coming on board. Other things that I wanted to just backtrack on a couple of things on red flags is making sure. One thing that we need to make sure is once you get the investment, it's not the end of the road, it's just the beginning. It's important that you continue to meet the requirements of the SEIS and EIS scheme for a period of time post-investment, because if you don't, there is a huge risk that the investor will lose their tax relief, and then eventually they will end up having to pay back any relief they got previously. So for example, they may have received their income tax relief at the time of investment, but if you don't maintain the conditions and continue to meet those conditions, they can lose that relief and end up having to repay back HMRC, which will not go down well. They will then come back to you, suing, raising all sorts of issues about its investment, what you promised them, and then not meeting it, and then you just end up falling foul. So those are the sort of things we mentioned. But in terms of legal structure, definitely has to be within the company. We need to help you consider all your current shareholders at the time, pre-investment and post-investment, so we make sure everyone continues to meet the conditions.
Perfect. So any updates on recent HMRC changes that founders should be aware of? So from the tax side, obviously HMRC have become a lot stricter now with SEIS and EIS applications. So even if you do receive the advance assurance, again, when you issue the shares to your investors, there will be another set of questions that you have to answer when applying for the actual certificates. So you have to resubmit all your documents, and at that stage, the HMRC will reassess your company to ensure that nothing has changed. And that's every time you raise investment under the scheme. HMRC will ask for updated accounts, updated business plan, investment deck, and a cash flow forecast. So yeah, it's just to ensure that you're always keeping on top of things, and like Yael said, just to make sure that you do qualify for at least 3 years from the date your shares were issued. So up until the 3 years, HMRC can do checks on you. So you just want to make sure you always qualify, your trading activity doesn't change, and if it does, you come back to us, let us know, so we can reevaluate your business and just check it still with the criteria under the legislation. Perfect. So I think that's it from us. Is there anything else you want to mention?
I think probably a couple of other things I would probably touch on, just general ongoing compliance with EIS and SEIS, and just general pointers I would just point out. So in terms of business decks and business plans, what we tend to find is sometimes they become completely overcomplicated. it's better. You've got to understand HMRC are also humans. They're not going to be experts in your fields. Always try and keep models and business plans simple and easy to understand. It would help, honestly, it would help your process. If you try and overcomplicate things, it just doesn't help. In terms of the money you use, please make sure we have to ensure the funds are actually being used to promote the business growth. They shouldn't be used for things like expenses or paying off debt or paying off your expenses, such as that. It's quite, I think it's quite, for those that people think, oh, it's my money. Once the money's in, I can do whatever I want with it. You have to show that money is being used for the purposes of the company's business growth and not much else. If you end up using it for other things and HMRC catch wind of it, again, it can cause you to sort of lose the relief for your investors, would not be fun at all. Second, other thing is I'll say, please, as much as it sounds, you may read a lot about it being quite simple, quite easy to set up. We do honestly recommend speaking to professionals, whether it's us at Dragon Argent or other advisors. Please do reach out and speak to people about it. Make sure what you've got set up is correct and complete for SEIS and EIS purposes. We don't want you to be in a position where you've taken the funds in, promising the world to your investors, and then realizing actually they don't qualify for whatever reason. And once you've taken money and then issue shares, it is not easy at all to try and reverse the whole process. So just the key couple of pointers I would point out from there. But otherwise, thank you for your time. I think, Nick, are we opening up to questions?
Absolutely. Thanks so much for your time today, Misha and Yo. That was really, really helpful. And it was great to hear at the end. This is like music to my ears, like to hear that, please, whatever you do, don't overcomplicate your business. These investors and HMRC, anyone looking at that business, they're not an expert in it. They don't have the knowledge that you have in it. So it needs to be sort of really simplified and understood. So it was good to hear that, because that's a big part of what we do at Robot Mascot. So look, there are some questions. I've got one here from Simon Browning, who said, if you submit a good advanced assurance application, do most applications go through?
Yes, they do. Only because we ensure from our side that your business does qualify under the legislation. At the end of the day, it's our reputation on the line as well with HMRC. So we ensure we don't put forward any applications that don't qualify. If there's something in your business plan, investment deck, or cash flow forecast that obviously just shouts no, or there's a red flag, we'll come back to you, we'll advise you on where you can correct it, what the legislation says, how you can go about changing your business plan, trading activity, to sort of tweak it to how HMRC would like to see it and how it also benefits your investors. So our applications always go through. If we do feel like you don't qualify, we'll never submit your application. We don't want to go down the line of HMRC coming back with loads of questions. And ultimately you getting a rejection from HMRC. So we'll always ensure we checked all the documents thoroughly, advise you accordingly, yeah, so it just meets the legislation, and yeah, and so you're happy as well at the end of the day.
Fantastic. We've got another question here from Wayne Joseph. And I thought there'd be a few questions around this one. It's where you mentioned those three investors. So you mentioned it's a bit of a chicken and egg situation, but it's good to have these three investors lined up for HMRC. And the question is, please, can you give some steer on what are the minimum amounts that the three investors would be committing to, maybe expressed as a percentage?
There is really no percentage, really. It's more just for HMRC to see they're not speculative investments. And we haven't actually ourselves heard of HMRC reaching out to these investors, because obviously we don't ultimately come to know of it. However, HMRC may reach out to them. So they've got, obviously, you're going to provide their name and address, so they can check if they've they feel like there's something off in your business plan, or they've seen it before, they've checked so they do background checks on directors and founders to check it's not a tried and tested business plan, business activity. So if they feel like there's something off, they might actually reach out. So it's really, there's no minimum amount or maximum amount you've got to put down. You just need to make sure that you've spoken to active people out there. If you can't find 3 individuals, HMRC also actually, if you're going to reach out to a platform like, I don't know, Seeders, Crowdcube, any sort of platform to raise investment, any sort of correspondence with that platform will also be fine. So any email correspondences, any sort of like messages, anything to show HMRC that you're a genuine business looking to raise investment.
Absolutely. Thank you for
I
that.
think I would add to that.
Yeah,
Whereby I would say the investors do not have to provide a firm commitment, but there has to be some commitment, I think is the difference. So we're not saying you need someone to say, I definitely will invest in X amount in your company. It's more, I am interested in investing this amount. And provided you have documentation and evidence to show that, that generally would be sufficient to be deemed as one investor. So we're not looking for signing on a dotted line, so to speak. We just need you to show, the company just needs to show that there is some commitment from at least 3 different investors, or from a crowdfunding or fundraising platform such as Crowdcube, Seeders, who is willing to work with you because they see there is potential there. Then that generally is sufficient. But that obviously, if you were to come to us, we would advise you on a case-by-case basis.
Okay, thank you very much. I was just wondering because, say, for example, I'm trying to raise 100,000, but the 3 investors that I've contacted are only kind of like saying maybe a couple of thousand each initially, and I will be seeking to attract more investors along the line, bigger investors along the line. Would, only having pledges worth, say, 5 to 10,000, impact on my application process and make it likely to be refused? But it sounds like it isn't, and that you could perhaps say that each investor is, perhaps committing to, well, not committing, but like interested in investing 20k, and just as an interim measure.
Yeah, I mean, it's possible. I mean, if you're going for the advance assurance, whilst you would like to get confirmation it's for the entire 100, that's not to say you can't go in and ask for like you say, the initial 20, 25, 30, 35, that initial amount. So then you can show that you've already got committed for at least half of that amount, for that smaller half of that smaller amount first, and at least once you get that, HMRC will then look at your business plan itself at that point to say, whether you meet all the other conditions, because it's not to say you have to go in and ask for the whole. No, for instance, if you're going for SEIS, you don't have to ask for the entire 250,000 advance assurance. You're only looking for the amount you're looking to raise. So I think that's something to just bear that in mind. When you're going for the advance assurance, it's not for 250, it's for such amount that you are raising at that point.
Cool, thank you. And there's another question here from Dr. Daniel R. Walsh, who's asking, we are a pre-seed startup company in the AI-enabled health technology arena. Can you assist us with finding appropriate seed funding?
We can't assist you, but we can sort of direct you in the right places for where you could raise investment. But we could help you with the whole application process, guide you down if you qualify, if you comply with all the legislation criteria. So we can check all the background information, but we can't raise investment.
Absolutely. Oh, thanks for that. I think as well, Daniel, we can reach out to you and have a chat with you about that too. So yeah.
I was going to say there'll be people like Nick's team at Robot Mascot. I'm sure there are a number of associations and networks which founders can join and pitch their business plan to, and they can then put you in touch with potential investors provided they are interested in your business plan. So unfortunately, like I said, we don't have the black book of contacts for investors itself, but we will be the ones who will be advising you in terms of putting the paperwork in place and putting the applications in for you.
Absolutely. Thanks for clearing that up. And There's another question coming from Gary Thornycroft, who is asking, if you raise funds under SEIS and EIS, are you restricted in raising government grant funding?
Yes, to a certain extent, yes, you are. So if you've already raised through a government grant, some government grants sort of takes up sort of a portion of your chunk for raising under SEIS and EIS. So we have to it sort of be on a case-by-case basis to see where you've got the funding from. We're going to need to check under the legislation to see if it eats up into your allowances for SEIS and EIS.
Cool. So I'm going to ask a question. You mentioned this chicken and egg situation with investors. We have a little bit of a strategy at Robot Mascot for this, but I wondered what's your advice to founders in making contact with those investors and building a relationship with an investor where they'll make that sort of commitment. How do you guys advise people to go about doing that?
So initially we sort of ask clients to look at their friends and families. Sometimes friends are happy to give like sort of a half a commitment, say yes, I would potentially invest a certain amount into your business. Other than that, it really is companies, talking at events or reaching out to crowdfunding websites or platforms to see if they can get any sort of investment. Our initial go-to is friends and family. Obviously not where you're asking your wife, because that does also eat up into 30%, but any sort of long distance family and just your friend circle, because sometimes they do that.
Yeah. And I just want to mirror back something you mentioned earlier, which I think was a bit of really good advice about speak to experts as much as you can in your journey. And I think it almost folds into that, where you would reach out to investors that you admire, investors that are in your space, investors that have invested in similar things, and ask their advice. Just reach out and talk to them and ask them for their expert advice. And before you know it, you've made that connection. And they then feel they're a part of your journey, your fundraising journey. You get a very soft introduction to an investor that way. So I've got.
I think I want to add as well. So
Yeah.
for that chicken and egg situation where Misha has mentioned, speak to family and friends, it's like I say, it's a soft commitment. It's not something that they have to, follow through. So it's just to potentially buy you a bit of time so that you've got the advance assurance. You can reach out to, then go out to invest, the actual investor, and say, look, I've got an advance assurance for this amount. You can take it up, and then the family and friend members don't have to necessarily take up that investment allocation either. So it's just saying there is potential there. And it's not to say that, like I say, it's not a firm commitment, it's not fixed in stone, and that they can always pull out. But the idea is just to get to the point where HMRC are comfortable that there is the potential serious investors involved, and therefore they'll be willing to give you that advance assurance. And then it doesn't mean you can't speak to other people about it.
Fantastic. And a question from Derek RJ here. He says that he's got he's been approved for EIS, and you mentioned about investors holding share for 3 years and no capital gain for them. And you then mentioned liquidation and 38%. I didn't hear that bit properly, so can you clarify the 38% bit, please?
Yeah, so generally, if an investor's invested into your company, let's say under SEIS, and they've invested, let's say, £10,000, they're going to get 50% income tax relief, so that's £5,000 back in their pocket through their personal tax return. The other 5,000 is at risk. If the company goes into liquidation, the ultimate loss that they're making under SEIS is 27%. And under EIS, it's 38%. So whatever their marginal rate is, they'll get that bit back through income tax or capital gains. So depending on their marginal rate you lose. So ultimately, and if someone's putting in 100,000, they're getting the maximum loss they're making is 27,000. So it's a big relief there. So you're not losing out so much.
Cool. Thumbs up there from Derek. Thanks for that, Derek. And from Gavin Russell, SEIS and EIS documentation seems to be very broad as to what type of business it supports. Can you confirm the games industry and businesses within that space can apply? Basically,
You
can the
can.
games industry apply for this stuff?
You can. It also depends on how your business is structured, your exact trading activity. That's something we'd have to look closely at. On the HMRC government portal, there is a list of excluded activities that you can look into. So if in Google, if you just type in HMRC, SEIS and EIS excluded activities, they'll give you a list of activities that won't be approved by HMRC. In some cases, some companies do get approved only because they excluded activities less than a certain percent. But yeah, gaming is allowable. You can claim SEIS and EIS, but we would have to look closely at your business plan to ensure there's nothing in there that's excluded activity, and to make sure that you comply with the full legislation.
Brilliant. Thanks a lot. I'm going to give a final question here. Like, if you could give one piece of practical advice, something that a founder could do, like really quickly, the first thing you'd advise them to do to prepare for their first SEIS, EIS raise, what would it be? What's that first step?
The first step is to check how long you've been trading for, to see if you qualify for SEIS. The thing about SEIS is that even if you have gone past 3-year period for when you can claim SEIS, in some cases, exceptional cases, you still might be able to qualify. So if you're looking to raise SEIS, double check your trading activity and the trading date that you started. It's very different to your corporation date. So if you're struggling to understand the difference, get in touch and we can find that for you. And then also, lastly, just advance assurance, because it is really key for the investors to invest into your business.
Fantastic. All right. Well, that brings us to the end of the session. Is there anything else you guys want to say? Do you want people to reach out and connect with you, or will you be reaching out to them?
Yeah, we would say if you have any further queries, we do offer, so similar to Nick, who offers 90 minutes, we do offer 30 minutes discovery call, a time to go through what you're proposing to do. We can go through how we can assist and talk to you about it and take things from there. So feel free to reach out to us if you would like a further call and chat about your business.
Fantastic. Well, thank you so much, Misha and Yeo, for your time today. And thank you everyone for joining us.
Thank you.
Thank you.